From the School of Life Foundation, this is another episode of What You Givin', a broadcast based on the invitation, find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world. This becomes your gift. Everyone has something inside of themselves to give. So, what are you giving? In my interviews, we meet people from all walks of life. I am Jack Rolfe, and on the show today, we have Jeff McKenna. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm very excited, as I am with every episode, for our listeners to get to know you and get to a little bit more know about you, what you're passionate about. And before we jump into some of those things, although I'm sure you're passionate about this too, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yes, definitely passionate about the family. Married for going on 34 years, and wonderful companion, fun, best friend, met at Rick's College in the day, now BYU, Idaho, and have 4 children and 3 grandchildren, and 3 of the 4 are married, with the 4th one coming home from his LDS mission, a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, part of it in St. Louis, Missouri, and the last part in Chile. And he gets home in 1 week.
Well, that is exciting. And what a combination of the mission sites there. He'll have some great stories to share, I'm sure. And I didn't realize that you were a Rick's College graduate. I'm an alumni from Rick's College myself. So that's one thing we have in common there. Loved my time at that school. That was fantastic. Your family sounds wonderful. And yes, I don't even suspect, I know you are passionate about it. In fact, before we started recording today, you and I are having a conversation that you were babysitting some grandsons this afternoon, and I'm going to be babysitting some of my grandchildren tomorrow, and we just both had a gleam in our eye as we talked about
both of us decided it was better than working, right, Jack?
Yes, but it also wears you out more than working.
Yes, exactly.
Because it is work. It's a work of love.
Amen.
Yes. But well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your family there. And tell us too, now you are in the law profession. Let us know not only about what that is and what it means to you, but what led you in the path of your journey on the School of Life to go into law?
Well, I am a lawyer. I like to say that I'm an estate planning attorney. Because that really is what I am. I don't do the courtroom work. I help clients to plan their affairs in such a way to help eliminate legal work upon their passing, hopefully eliminate conflicts upon their passing. Obviously, we deal with a lot of scenarios where we didn't do the planning, and we're trying to help clean up the situation. As an estate planning, estate administration attorney, you help people do the planning, and then you also help families when the loved one passes away. And I've done it for 27 years, Jack. That's really pretty much the only area of law I've ever been in. I was calculating the other day, I've done over 4,000 estate plans. I'm licensed in Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. All of my practice has been in southern Utah, but because we're so close to Nevada, we have an office in Mesquite, and I was born and raised in Las Vegas. And so I have a lot of friends and family in Nevada. I knew I wanted to have that Nevada license, and Arizona's in between the 2 places. So I got the Arizona license as well. And, but really, I think the path, life's journey took me to estate planning because I don't like conflict. I don't like people not liking me. If you want to know the honest truth, Jack, I'm way too insecure to have people not like me. And in a traditional legal setting, that's the case. You're going to have one side that just does not like you. And that's not to say that I haven't had to confront some really sticky situations, because in a family context, when things go wrong, they can be really ugly. But our first and foremost goal is to mediate, to resolve, to look for how we can, reach a common ground and try to keep the family together. The standard is, at the end of the conflict, can they still, bury the hatchet enough that when it comes time for a wedding, when it comes time for a funeral, they can still all be there. They can, keep that family, somewhat united. So that's my life journey when it comes to my professional career. Do the best I can to help people plan their affairs to avoid, unnecessary expenses, unnecessary taxes, and family conflict. And after they've passed, do what we can to make sure that family can stay a unified, united family.
Jeff, that's phenomenal. 27 years and over 4,000 clients you have had. And that just multiplies because of the families. There's many people in those families. You've had an opportunity to help and touch a lot of lives in that career and profession. And, here in a minute, we're going to talk about another aspect or area of your life. But before I do that, I felt impressed to dig a little deeper here with this estate planning. What, part of this show, a big part of this show is finding joy in our life. What joy comes into your life as you fulfill your role there in your career?
Jack, I'm glad you asked. I mean, I'm excited to talk about this other role as well, but the estate planning, there is a lot of joy. If there's somebody that's out there that's a discontented attorney, I would advise them to consider if it's something they enjoy. For me, I love solving problems. I love educating. Estate planning is a lot about educating and a lot about solving dilemmas, where the client comes in and there's just this dilemma, a child is in their house. They feel like they should let this child stay in the house, but if they give the house to the child, the other 3 children are going to feel like that's the golden child, and that, boom, we have that scenario that we don't want, where there's not going to be harmony. And so to work out a system where you can create a mechanism that has a fairness in that situation. And that's just one of 100 different ways that you try to create a system of where they can, again, the goal is, will they be able to be a family after mom and dad part, and after you've done it so many years, you come up with a lot of different tools and a lot of different solutions. And so there is great joy in being able to have those solutions and tools to create something that can work. Parents feel so at much peace knowing they have something, when you've hammered it out and you've looked at the different things, and you come up with what works for them and their family. And then to just be really bold and upfront to say, what, we may need to adjust more here before as you're a professional, you're always the boss, client, but I'm not going to hide me saying that I think this could cause problems in the family. And usually the clients are very deferential to looking at that. And I'm not bashful. If I feel like this boat's not going to float when they pass away, I let them know, even though they might think this is the right way to do it. I can see there being problems from just as a third party looking at this. And when I can look them in the eyes and say, you know what, we have something. It may not be perfect. We live in an imperfect world, but I can look at all of the kids and I can tell the kids, hey, mom and dad did this way for these reasons. And I feel like it's an appropriate approach. And that goes a long ways for the whole situation. And so there's a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment that comes knowing, what's going to be able to work in these different family dynamics. Jack, are you there?
We are here, and the recording's still going, but that's fine. We'll be able to splice this together, no problem. And so, Jeff, thank you, for sharing how your career brings that joy into your life. I'm going to ask you a little bit further too. The invitation we have is find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world. In regards to your profession, I think we can figure it out, but how would you define what need in the world you are meeting with what you do, your gift in doing that?
Jack, let me approach it from the standpoint of one of the harder estates to deal with is when you have blended families. You have a yours and a mine. Sometimes it's a yours and a mine and an ours. That can be really tricky to make sure that you're balancing everything that you have to balance. And in our current world, there are a lot more blended families. And so having those tools to be able to help blended families, I think is just a real great blessing. And it does bring a lot of joy because I've seen so many estates where there isn't any planning and it's a blended family, and the animosity and the discontent. And so I think in our current world, being able to bring a toolbox of tools to help these different families that have more complexity than just the standard vanilla scenario is really a great way to bring, joy and happiness to the world.
Well, that's wonderful. And I know the world's a little better place because of that work that you're doing there. And I'm just going to tell our listeners that was a little bonus. It wasn't necessarily the direction I was planning on going today. And I'm going to shift back to my original intended direction, but I'm grateful we got that little bonus there. And, I wanted to jump in now, Jeff, to you have a real love and passion for history, and I'll let you share that here in a minute. It led you on a journey in life to authoring a book, Saving Dr. Warren, A True Patriot. And so let's jump into that. First, tell us about your love of history. Tell us then about this journey of writing this book, and then let the listeners know, many of them probably don't know, who's Dr. Warren, right?
I love it, Jack. That is a great way to start, because it's how I start in the office. Our office is in downtown St. George, and it's a colonial looking building, and it's decorated very colonial. My partner and I love the Revolutionary era. And so as the clients walk through, they'll often comment on the decor or, the spirit of, early America. And all they have to do is say anything at all relevant to that. And they're going to get to 3 questions, because I'm going to talk to them about Dr. Warren. And the way I approach it is I'll say, and we have the book up at the counter. And so some people will say, oh, you wrote a book. Or they might say something about history and how they enjoy history. So I will say the first question: have you ever heard of the patriot, Dr. Joseph Warren? And 98%, only 1 in 50 will say, yes, I know about him, or I've heard about him. Most of us, and that would have been me 20 years ago, before I was first introduced to him. And it sounds like that might have been you, Jack, before.
It was.
And yet you're a great patriot. And so it's very common that we don't. And so my second question is, most of them will say, no, I've never heard of him. And my second question is, have you heard of his best friend? And then they'll wait, being like, who's his best friend? And I'll say, Paul Revere. Have you heard of him? And they'll chuckle and they'll say, well, of course I've heard of Paul Revere. And I will say something to the effect that if you had told Paul Revere 250 years ago, you're going to be more famous than your mentor, your hero, your best friend, he would have chuckled. More geographical land, because the third question is, who sent Paul Revere on his midnight ride? So first, have you ever heard of Dr. Warren? No. Second, have you ever heard of his best friend, Paul Revere? Of course. Third, who sent Paul Revere on his midnight ride? And some will kind of look and put the 2 and 2 together and say, was it Dr. Warren? And I'll say, yeah, it was. Dr. Warren coordinated everything with respect to Paul Revere's when he left Boston across the waterways and linked up on the other side and then rode his horse. And he had sent another patriot by the name of William Dawes across the landway, because he wanted to make sure one of them got out of Boston. So one went by the narrow neck of land out of Boston, and the other went across the Charles River to the other side out of Boston. And they did their thing at the behest of Dr. Warren. He coordinated it all. Paul Revere, Jack, will actually name his son Joseph Warren Revere, after his best friend and great buddy, after Joseph Warren dies at the age of 34. He barely had turned 34 when he dies at Bunker Hill on June 17th, 1775. But Paul Revere, just, yeah, they were the closest of friends. Their wives, Jack, will die within 1 week of each other. Paul Revere will get married right away. Joseph Warren has an amazing fiance, but he never marries, and then he dies. His life was always in peril because of what he was doing, and so he felt like things needed to settle down before they settled down. But he was an amazing individual, and yeah, 20 years ago I got introduced to him, and that led my journey into what we're discussing and talking about right now.
Yeah, that is so exciting, and it gives me chills. And I got introduced to this recently. I was sitting in on a devotional, a fireside that you gave in the historic tabernacle here in St. George, and you were speaking about this very topic and shared many stories about Joseph Warren, and it's just phenomenal of all of the things that he did. And it's funny, you mentioned the Freedom Trail in Boston, and he's got so many touch points on that trail. And I had just been on the Freedom Trail a month before that and didn't even realize those touch points. And so next time I go back, I'm going to look at that a whole lot differently. And so I think it's phenomenal that you've taken upon yourself to get this piece of history, this word out. And so with that in mind, on the show, we talk about having these inspirational moments about your soul speaking to you, and not only then listening, but having the courage to act upon those things. What did your soul whisper to you? What sparked this 20-year journey, I believe, of putting the book together? How did that all start?
Well, the 20 years had to come about, Jack, because I can write a really good will and I could write a really good trust, but that makes for a really boring book for a 14-year-old middle school student. So I had to learn to write. But it was 20 years ago that I came across Joseph Warren. And at the time, my children were young, and I read to them every night. I'd come home from work, we'd have dinner, do whatever we needed to do. And my wife would say, "Tag, you're it. Time to put the kids to bed." And I would read to them, and I loved reading children's literature. And I always had this dream how fun it would be to maybe write, something that a young adult, would enjoy. And when I came across Dr. Warren's story, I thought, here it is. This is what I want to do. This is my passion. This is the gift to the world. If I could, do something, and my gift to Joseph Warren. And so that's how it began, 20 years ago, learning about him in a book I was reading, wondering how. I've always loved history. How had I never heard of him? One tidbit that's so fascinating, Jack, is that more geographical landmarks are named after Joseph Warren than any founding father, except for George Washington. That's how popular and famous he was in early America. All of the early states have a Warren County, a Warrenton, a Warrenville, and they're almost universally named after Dr. Joseph Warren, the hero of Bunker Hill. But we forgot him. He just got forgotten. Paul Revere, in 1862, an amazing poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, was written. And it's an amazing poem. It's so patriotic. It's so but it's not historically accurate at all. And it completely left out Dr. Warren. And, and then, like you said, the Freedom Trail, that is such a fascinating point on the Freedom Trail, Jack, just to take 2 minutes there, because I love the Freedom Trail. Over 3 million people a year go on the Freedom Trail. And one of the first places you go is to one of the coolest cemeteries in the United States. You go to the Old Granary Cemetery. John Hancock's there. Sam Adams is there. Paul Revere is there. The victims of the Boston Massacre are there. Ben Franklin's parents are there. Mother Goose is there. Joseph Warren, Jack, was there, but he was too good to get left there. And on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, when Lafayette was coming to dedicate the cornerstone of the new memorial, the old memorial was built. It was a 2-story memorial that was built on the location where Joseph Warren fell. But the new one was built on the top of the hill. It was going to be a 20-story. Lafayette was going to dedicate it. It was huge. It was big. It was amazing. There was no way the hero of Bunker Hill could be left in the old granary burial grounds. So they moved him to a church so that the visitors would be able to pay proper respect at a proper place, not the old granary. And then from the church, the family took Joseph Warren's body like 25 years later and put it in a family plot outside of the current downtown Boston area that's now in a really, really rough area. And so all these 3 million visitors that come, they don't get to hear the story of Joseph Warren at the old granary because he was too good to be left there. So that's what you have. That's what ends up. It's crazy.
Oh, wow. One thing some of the listeners know, some probably don't if they're new today, that I record these podcasts. They get the audio portion, but as I'm recording here, we're doing this on Zoom. So I get to see you. They don't get to see you. But I see the passion just exploding and exuding out of you. And the thought came to me, as Dr. Joseph Warren is up in heaven doing the work he's doing now, he probably occasionally looks down and sees Jeff McKenna telling his story. And on one point, I think he probably blushes a little bit. But on the other side, he probably smiles, thinking, thank you, Jeff, for telling my story. In fact, I get chills after I said that. And somebody had to tell it, right?
I appreciate you so much saying that. And Jack, can I just share, I shared it in the talk that you heard, and I'd love to share it for your audience. One of the standouts of Joseph Warren, because he has been almost universally forgotten, although there are some new things that are starting to bring him back to the public conscience, which is super cool. But in 1981, this is the most monumental, somewhat recent, although we're talking 50 years, right? But somewhat recent reference to Dr. Warren was in 1981. It was Ronald Reagan in his inaugural address where he gave that speech. And the quote was this, Jack, and I just love to share it because I think it's so apropos. You talked about how Joseph Warren could be in heaven and he could be looking down. This is the quote that Ronald Reagan used of Dr. Warren. And he says, most Americans don't know this founding father, but he may have been one of the greatest, but he's been forgotten because he died so early in the American cause. And this was what Ronald Reagan quoted in 1981. And if you remember, 1981 is a rough time. We have the hostages in Iran. They've been in Iran for 444 days. We've not been able to get them out. We've got the oil embargoes that are just wreaked havoc on the economy, and the recession has caused millions of Americans not having jobs. And so Reagan takes over in 81, and in his inaugural address in January, he says these words from Dr. Warren from 1775. Our nation is in danger, but not to be despaired of. On you depend the fortunes of America. You're going to decide the important questions upon which rests the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. Prophetically, Joseph Warren said that in 1775. Ronald Reagan uses it in his inaugural address in 1981. And isn't it apropos in 2022? Act worthy of ourselves as Americans. And millions are depending on us to do what we should be doing. I just love that. And so I like to think that, yeah, Dr. Warren, I hope he's still mindful of this amazing country and nation. I have to believe he is, Jack. And I have to think that the memory of Dr. Warren is something that can help us all be better Americans and be more, more patriotic and more grateful for those that sacrificed so much for us to have what we have.
I'm grateful you shared that. That is wonderful advice that has literally been passed down since 1775. And I want to add to that, Jeff. We have listeners to this podcast from all over the world. And so first of all, I want to say for those listening from America, from the United States, learn more about your history and live up to your responsibility. But I'm going to say that to everybody listening today, whatever country you're listening from and living in, learn about your history and live up to your responsibility. And then can we all unite as countries for peace and unity and just helping and loving one another? If there's anything that could come out of this podcast, that would be one thing that would warm my heart to do that. Now, I want to go back for something you said too on the 20-year journey. When you first had the spark to write the book, you didn't know how to write a book. You knew how to write all these other things in your profession. And I had a similar thing. When I had the spark to write the book that we now use as the curriculum in the School of Life Foundation, Learn to School Your Toughest Opponent. It took me several years to get that together too. I didn't know how to write a book, and I put it off. But I shouldn't have put it off, because my soul was speaking to me, just like your soul was speaking to me. So I share that today. If anybody's listening and you've had a thought, you need to write a book or get a message out in some other venue, whatever it is, listen to that and have the courage to follow through with it, even if you don't know how. I will tell you, and I think Jeff would agree with me, the how will start to fall into place. You just got to do the effort, and everything else comes together. And I'll tell the listeners, Jeff has given me several thumbs up. And so I know.
Amen. I would just say amen, Jack.
Amen. I love it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I absolutely love that. And now you also mentioned middle school students. So this book is geared towards middle school. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is. And we had two different classes that vetted the book. And so I first had it read probably 10 years ago by a teacher here. And I got just enough positive comments, Jack, that I thought, okay, I'm on to something. But I also got enough critiques from these middle school students. Middle school students aren't bashful about critiquing you. They'll tell you your breath stinks right to your face. Yeah. So I got enough critiques, knowing that I had to recalibrate it to get it, where I wanted. So it was kind of perfect, but it also led to a lot more work, rewriting. I completely rewrote the book, but the ideas were still the same. It's just how it was to be presented. And then another middle school class reviewed it once it was, much closer to a finished product. And that was exciting. They really enjoyed it. And I polished it up a little bit more from them, because it was the final manuscript that they were looking at. One more polished up, and then went to final editors that I paid to edit, one in Florida and one in Chicago. And then, we published it independently. And then from there, it's been used in a number of different classes. We have an essay contest, Jack, that's so fun. The Southern Utah Veterans Home there here in Ivins in Southern Utah, they have sponsored this now 2 years in a row and are sponsoring. They're really excited to sponsor it again for this next year. But what it is the book itself has an essay contest. At the very beginning, the essay contest, the time frame, Jack, is right after 9/11. And it's a middle school student. And there is a veteran. He's a Pearl Harbor survivor. He's one of the most patriotic people I ever knew. I took a Southern Utah Pearl Harbor survivor and I transported him to outside of Boston, where my story takes place. His name is Lee Warren, and I just put him right there. And he sponsors an essay contest. And this was the theme: what does patriotism mean after 9/11? My main character loves to write, can write really well, does a great job of writing to the judges, what the judges want to read, what the judges want to hear. And he wins his $500. And then everybody is patting him on the back as a great patriot. And he's like, I'm not a patriot. I like to write. I wanted to win $500. I just wrote what they wanted to hear. I'm not a patriot. But it ends up leading into having these experiences, first with a World War II family member. And then that World War II family member conveys to him an heirloom that creates a bond between him and Dr. Joseph Warren in 1770s Boston. But the point I was going to make is that currently we have an essay contest, and the essay contest is, what does patriotism mean to you after reading Saving Dr. Warren, A True Patriot? And so these middle school students are able to write an essay just like the main character in the book. And we have a $500 prize, a $250 prize, and a $100 prize, and a matching amount for the teacher. So if there's any teachers out there, our business plan is this. And if you know any teachers, please convey this business plan. Free books, free lesson plans, a free author visit, and this essay contest where if one of your students wins, you win as well. But really, we created a nonprofit charity, and we want to just there's not a teacher that's ever wanted books that we've not been able to give them books or audio books or digital books so that they can have their students participate and be part of this. No cost, no expense. And it's been so fun to read these essays, Jack, and to make a really big deal. The Veterans Home helps us make a really big deal on April 19th. That's Patriots Day. That's the first day of the American Revolution. Joseph Warren was in the thick of it. He was fighting right there with some of the greatest, Minutemen and Patriots in our history, and he was right there in that first battle on the first day of the Revolution, April 19th. So that's when we have the award ceremony. March 5th, which is the anniversary of the Boston Massacre, which again, that's right there on the Freedom Trail, and Dr. Warren tended to the wounds of those that were shot. He was, very intimately involved in the trial afterwards. His best friend, John Adams, or one of his best friends, John Adams, was doing the trial. Just a really quick side note. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing so fast, but if you go to the Adams home, just outside of Boston in Braintree, there is still a portrait of Joseph Warren above the fireplace. Abigail Adams got that portrait from her husband, John Adams, from the artist, the local Boston artist that did all of these amazing portraits of patriots. He went to England during the war. John Adams was visiting England, got the portrait, bring it across the Atlantic, gave it to his wonderful wife, Abigail. She hung it above the fireplace, and she told the family, it is to never come down. The portrait of Joseph Warren is to stay there. Once the United States Park Service took over in like the 1940s over the Adams home, it honored Abigail's request. But, John Adams did the trial for the those that were the ones involved, the British soldiers, and Joseph Warren was involved in all of that with respect to the Boston Massacre. But March 5th is when the essay contest deadline is. So any student, anybody can turn it in before March 5th. And then we review them and judge them. And then on April 19th, we get 10 finalists, and we make a big deal out of these 10 finalists. And then we award the $100, the $250, and the $500. And every year we've also had a veteran that he's part of the judging. I always have him be a judge because he's so generous. He says, Jeff, these essays are too good to only have 3 winners. And then he gives $50 to everybody that is one of the 10, there's 7 others that don't win a prize. So it's just a lot of fun, Jack, to be able to reward these middle school students for their hard work in writing essays about patriotism.
That sounds fun, definitely. And what a fantastic thing you're doing for middle school students and their teachers. And what a great age to ignite a fire of history and just something that hopefully their soul will speak to them, and it'll take them on their life journey and wherever that's going to take them, and what discovering their talents and what their gift is to the world. And for those listening today, in the show notes, you'll be able to find website links and other information so that you can learn more about the book and this contest and how to get in touch with Jeff if you want to, and those types of things. So
and Jack, 3 sets of books for homeschool groups, any teachers. Really, we can get them anything that they need as far as resources at no cost to them.
That is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And that'll lead right into the question, the invitation of this show. So in your journey, Jeff, with this book and this project, when I share the invitation, find what brings you joy and match it to the needs of the world, how would you define that in regards to what we just talked about?
Well, I would say what we were saying, our nation has had better times, Jack, when we've been more united. And we need that. We need our country bears the name united. Every time we say our nation's name. And so we can all get behind remembering those that gave so much. Joseph Warren gave all. 4 young children, when he goes to Bunker Hill, and literally they posted a guard, his college roommate, to say, "You're not going to Bunker Hill. You are way too valuable to be on top of that hill." That he felt like he needed to be there. And so the point being is that, your question to me, I feel like our nation needs the memory of Joseph Warren. We need to remember not just him, but all veterans, all people that sacrificed for our country. We need to try to be just better Americans, just try to be kinder, nicer, more understanding of those that are on the other side of the political aisle. If I wear a blue jersey, I need to be more understanding of those that wear the red. If I wear a red, I need to recognize that somebody wearing a blue could be patriotic as well. Nobody wants a country that's all red. Nobody wants a country that's all blue. Our flag is red, white, and blue, and our nation looks a whole lot more beautiful red, white, and blue. And so I think that's the message of Dr. Warren. I think that's, so that's my mission. I'm an estate planning attorney because right now that pays the bills. And I'm an author and a speaker and a motivator to middle school students because that's the passion that I have. I feel like that's a way I can give back to, all these that gave a whole lot more than I've ever given.
Well, thank you, Jeff McKenna, for sharing your gift to the world. And this podcast is aimed at getting everyone in the world sharing their gift. And I'm just going to say right now, when you wake up in the morning and you roll out of bed, if you're sharing your gift, then you're going to be passionate about it, just like the passion you hear in Jeff McKenna's voice today. And so if you're not feeling passion, you might not be sharing your gift. So get on that path, listen to what your soul is telling you, use your gifts, your talents, your skills, find the need in the world and put it out there, and you'll find great joy with that as well. And, we've come to the point in the show, I can't believe how fast these shows go. At least they go for me fast. I hope the listeners find them, they go fast too, because they're just so informational and so inspirational. But we've come to that point where we need to wrap the show to an end. But I don't like that part, but I like the part because this is our golden nugget question time. And so the golden nugget question for Jeff McKenna today is, what would be one thing you would like the listeners to take away from you today? It could be something we've already talked about or something we haven't talked about yet. But what would be that one thing from Jeff McKenna?
Well, somebody, Jack, that I really, really, really respected when I was a young boy and I was growing up in the late 70s and the early 80s, said, his name was Spencer Kimball, and he said that maybe the most powerful word in the English language is the word remember. So my golden nugget for the listeners is there is power in that word. Remember. I am all in when it comes to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that was what Christ wanted his disciples to do, was to remember him and his sacrifice. There's power in that word, and there's power in it with respect to our country, to remember. And, in all aspects, I would say, let's make that word an important word in our lives, whether that's in a setting to remember, God and what he has created, if that's in a setting to remember this nation, if it's in a setting to remember those that are important in our lives, to not forget our parents and our children, and to just remember those things. But particularly, we'll say for our nation as well, and remember that we are, it's always been hard to be united. When they had the first continental, congresses and the first constitutional convention, it was so fractioned and it was so divisive, but we figured out how to unite. And let's try to do that as a country. Remember our past so that we can do what we need to do in the future. That's probably what I would say is my golden nugget to share. That one powerful word, remember.
That is a great golden nugget and a wonderful word. And so I'm going to add to that, as Jeff was sharing with us about this word, remember, I suspect most of you listening had your soul speak to you as to what it is you need to remember. Now, he listed several things for us, and it could have been that. Maybe it's something else as well. So write it down, etch it in your heart, and remember. Jeff, it's been wonderful having on the show today. Thank you again so much.
I thank you, Jack. Honestly, I thank you. Wonderful questions, fun. I just applaud you as well for the message and the purpose of the podcast. So just a great privilege to be part of it.
Well, thank you so much. And just a reminder to those listening, your heart feels for you. Your mind reasons for you, but your soul speaks to you. Are you listening? Did you listen today? If so, what did you hear? And what did you learn? Will you now have the courage to act upon what you felt? Thank you for tuning in. Please follow us on your podcast app so that each new episode is always downloaded, ready for you to listen in, and then share the link with others. We would love to have you leave a review and also follow us on Instagram. A special thanks goes out to our producers, Ben and Kayla Martin. Now it is time to move upward and onward and ask yourself, what you given?